Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Laura Macon-Isherwood from London, and these are the top headlines of the day. President Volodymyr Zelensky calls on the West to impose new sanctions against Russia, including a boycott of Russian exports and oil. The president also urged the international community to provide his capital Kyiv with military aircraft.
З український.
The International Court of Justice begins hearings of genocide claims by the Ukraine. Kyiv will ask the UN's top court to issue an immediate order to halt the Russian invasion. Moscow officials have declined attending that hearing. Kyiv rejects Moscow's offer of introducing humanitarian corridors to Russia and Belarus. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister calls the Russian proposal for the passage of civilians from Kharkiv, Mariupol and Kyiv to Belarus and Russia unacceptable. Amid a flare-up of hostilities on the ground, Ukraine and Russia prepare for a third round of peace talks today, after nearly 2 weeks of war. Europe and UK natural gas prices hit record highs amid supply fears as the European Union and the United States mull sanctions on Russian energy firms. Russia has announced a ceasefire and the formation of safe corridors for all civilians to evacuate from Ukraine. The regions, including in the claimed ceasefire, are the capital Kyiv, hard-hit Kharkiv, Sumy and Mariupol. But the local leaders there have cast doubt on the pledge, saying there have been no confirmations of a temporary ceasefire so far. Within hours, the Russian Defense Ministry published a video showing tanks driving along roads in what it said was the Kyiv region of Ukraine. Russia calls the campaign it launched on February the 24th a special military operation. It has repeatedly denied attacking civilian areas and says it has no plans to occupy Ukraine. Russia claims that the military will hold fire and open humanitarian corridors in several Ukrainian cities. But according to the RIA news agency, the corridor from Kyiv will lead to Russian ally Belarus, and civilians from Kharkiv will only have a corridor leading to Russia. Corridors from Mariupol and Sumy will lead to other Ukrainian cities and then to Russia. Our correspondent Anis Malik is joining us now live from Kyiv to bring us the latest update on what's happening on the ground there. Anis, Russia claims it's imposing this ceasefire. Has there been any evidence of that so far?
Well, the claim of ceasefire has been looked at as if it's a smokescreen here in Ukraine, at least. I'm currently in Kyiv, in the capital city of Kyiv, and they say that the ceasefire, the patterns or the paths that have been given for the ceasefire, for the evacuation, they either lead to Russia or to Belarus, both which are the countries which are actively engaging, as they allege, which are actively engaging in the action against Ukraine currently, and that citizens won't necessarily be having, or in actuality be having, a safe passage. Therefore, the Ukrainian authorities that I've spoken to, they say that if Russia is actually serious for giving a way out or a safe passage, then it should be for the entire country and not limited to certain sectors.
And Anis, from those that you've spoken to on the ground, how do those civilians feel about this? Of course, they may not want to head to Russia or Belarus, actually to Europe. Have they got any other choice, though?
Well, most of the people would want to either go to the western side to Lviv, where I was earlier today and yesterday, and where we have been reporting from for the past 4 days or so. And the other half would want to go to the European cities. Not many, in fact, I've come across nobody who would want to go to the Russian or to the Belarusian side by and large. And there is immense rush of people, a flock of people flocking in at the railway station here in Kyiv as well. They're trying to seek a safe passage out of the city as the reports emerge that the Russian tanks are closing in towards the capital city of Kyiv. Now I'm standing at the main city square, which has literally been fortified by army personnel. They've put up these sandbags, the tires. There's increased military presence literally at every 100 or 200 meter, and you're asked to give your documentation in order to proceed. That includes your accreditation, your press card, and in case if you're not a local, if you're a foreign journalist, then they would be requiring your passport as well.
And in terms of the military expectation there at the moment, obviously President Volodymyr Zelensky has tried to encourage people to continue to fight, to continue to hold off this invasion. Is there still hope there that they can keep Russian troops at bay?
Well, there are some disgruntled people, mostly who are in their 40s, who say that they do not want to fight alongside the army. There is a rule that has been introduced that 18 to 60 will be considered as volunteers. So it's not really mandatory, but it's unsaid that it is mandatory that they have to fight alongside their army. That has not been received very well. While majority of the people would want to fight as a volunteer, but making it as an obligation or as an obligatory sentence, that has not been received very well. The troops here, well, they're very enthusiastic, they're charged. They say that they will be protecting their land at all cost, come what may, and that is the reason they're out on the roads trying to protect their city against any possible attack or invasion that may take place.
Thank you, Anas. Anas Malik reporting from Kyiv live for us there. Well, amid claims by Russia that a fresh ceasefire will begin to open humanitarian corridors in Ukraine, the Russian ministry has confirmed it will be using drones to monitor the evacuation. It also added that those who want to leave Kyiv will also be able to be airlifted to Russia. The Kremlin confirmed it decided to call the ceasefire after French President Emmanuel Macron personally requested it, in view of the current situation in war-hit cities. Remember, the ceasefire declared on Saturday failed after multiple violations were reported, with both sides accusing each other of failing to hold fire in the port city of Mariupol and in the nearby city of Volnovskaya. According to the UN tracking mission, at least 351 civilians are confirmed to have been killed since Russian troops invaded on February 24th, and another 707 wounded. The real numbers are probably considerably higher, though. Most of the civilian casualties were caused by explosive weapons, with the wide impact area including shelling, missiles and airstrikes. Residents at a Ukrainian orphanage were forced to flee after Russian troops attacked a nuclear power plant over the weekend. They were among the youngest fleeing Ukraine in search of security. The UN Human Rights Commission has confirmed that 1.5 million refugees so far have fled to surrounding countries, adding that this makes the Ukraine exodus the worst humanitarian crisis in Europe since World War II.
They are among the youngest forced to flee in what the United Nations calls the worst humanitarian crisis in Europe since World War II. More than 200 children evacuated an orphanage in southeastern Ukraine over the weekend as Russian troops attacked a nearby nuclear power plant. The children, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, arrived in the western city of Lviv after a 24-hour train ride with orphanage staffers, including a very emotional director.
My heart is being torn apart. I'm sorry, it is tough. When families are separated, it is very hard. I'm sorry, I simply lack the words, and I feel so sorry for these children. They are so young. I don't understand why the Russian people cannot believe that we are being bombarded, that we and our children are being killed.
As night fell and the temperature plunged, the children waited patiently on the platform at Lviv, none of them crying or complaining. 16-year-old Vladimir Kovtun said he finally felt safe.
It is terrifying to stay in Zaporizhia when the air raid sirens are going off and we must constantly hide in the basement.
As snow began to fall, they boarded buses bound for their new home in neighboring Poland, where dozens of other orphans from Kyiv, Odessa, and Kharkiv are already being housed in places such as the Osa Hotel in Warsaw, which has been repurposed for refugees. Conference rooms were turned into makeshift dormitories for around 700 children who can stay as long as they need help, a hotel executive said. One woman overseeing the children said she was being barraged with questions from them about when the situation will end, adding, quote, "They are afraid and we are afraid. We don't have any answers for them. We don't know what will happen tomorrow, what will happen in an hour." As of Sunday, the civilian death toll since Moscow launched its invasion of Ukraine on February 24th stood at 364, including more than 20 children, according to the United Nations, with hundreds more injured.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has been accused of helping a Russian newspaper owner get a seat in the House of Lords. The opposition has demanded an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the elevation of Evgeny Lebedev to the House of Lords. In 2020, the British security services had warned against granting peerage to Evgeny Lebedev, claiming the Russian-British businessman's presence in Parliament might pose a risk to national security. Now, it's been reported that MI5 and MI6 withdrew their warning after a direct intervention by Boris Johnson, who apparently accused them of anti-Russianism. The Sunday Times has reported that the House of Lords Appointments Commission had also advised Prime Minister Johnson against granting the peerage, based on the same assessment by the security services. The 41-year-old businessman took his seat in December 2020 as Baron Lebedev of Hampton and Siberia. Last week, he made an appeal to Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine via his newspaper, The Evening Standard. In a front-page letter, he condemned the invasion and pleaded with Russian President Vladimir Putin to save the world from annihilation. Evgeny Lebedev is the son of Russian oligarch and former KGB agent Alexander Lebedev. He moved to London aged 8 to be with his billionaire father and has remained in the UK ever since. In 2009, the father and son bought a 65% stake in the Evening Standard newspaper, bought The Independent and launched the newspaper too. Lebedev is a friend of Boris Johnson and was part of his peerages list, which included the Conservative leader's close political allies, party donors and his own brother, Joe Johnson. After being made a peer, Lebedev condemned the snobbery and casual racism of critics who accused him of being one of the Prime Minister's cronies. Boris Johnson has kicked off a week of intense diplomatic efforts with foreign leaders to build a united front against Vladimir Putin. He's hosting the leaders of Canada and Europe at Downing Street today. It comes as ministers scramble to go faster and harder with sanctions levelled against the Kremlin. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has already arrived in London ahead of this meeting with Mr Johnson and the Dutch Prime Minister. London is Trudeau's first stop on a four-country whirlwind tour. After he meets with the British and Dutch PMs, Trudeau will take off to hold meetings with the other European leaders in Riga, Latvia, Berlin and Poland. Trudeau has said repeatedly that sanctions are the biggest weapon the West can deploy against Moscow, but the international pressure on NATO is increasing after the Western military alliance turned down a direct plea from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to establish a no-fly zone to protect civilians.
In place for up to 30 days, but we said that we would lift it as soon as possible. We've held updates.
Russia is suffering heavy losses on account of economic isolation backed by Western countries, but the soaring oil prices could prove to be highly beneficial for the country, which is one of the largest producers of crude oil in the world. Through the economic sanctions, Western countries are trying to financially isolate Russia and make it impossible for Putin to finance his wars. But the soaring oil prices may give him more money for the same. Brent oil prices have soared to a near 14-year high of $140 a barrel, since the highest since 2008. The price per barrel of Brent oil has increased 33% since Russia invaded Ukraine on February the 24th. As a result of skyrocketing prices, Russia's sales of oil and natural gas have far exceeded initial forecasts for 2021, accounting for 36% of the country's total budget. Russian oil and gas revenues exceeded initial plans by 51.3% in 2021, totaling $119 billion. The Russian Finance Ministry had initially projected an oil price of $45 per barrel when compiling the budget for 2021. Oil is technically still exempt from sanctions, but reports say Russian oil exporters are struggling to find buyers. Shell is one of the only companies still buying Russian oil, although it said it would donate the profits to Ukrainian causes. The Gulf countries, which had suffered from declines in oil prices since 2014, now seem all the more reluctant to take immediate action as they benefit from the short-term price surge. But the oil-rich Gulf monarchies have so far resisted Western pressure to raise output, prioritising their own strategic and economic interests instead. The Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies have so far failed to respond to a call to produce more and faster, despite pressure on the Gulf states in particular. If the barrel stays above $100, this will mean that none of the 6 Gulf Cooperation Council countries will face a budget deficit by 2022. Gulf member states want to keep Russia as part of its OPEC+, as that's the only way to ensure an effective market managing tool in the years to come. Russia may struggle in future to sell oil as buyers flee the stigma, logistical challenges and fears of further sanctions that come with dealing with Moscow in the wake of the Ukraine invasion. The price might be working in Russia's favour, but it faces a major freeze-out from buyers that could be a big point of contention going forward.
Neid on väga raske lahutada väiksemate turude kaudu siis juba üle Euroopa.
French President Emmanuel Macron held another high-stakes talk with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. In a major development following the talks, the Russian military has now announced that temporary ceasefire will open humanitarian corridors to make the safe passage for civilians stuck within the war zone. The development is said to have come at the French president's request, and as Russian troops started to launch fresh military offensives in several Ukrainian cities, including Irpin, which is just 26 kilometers from the capital city of Kyiv. During the call, Putin once again reiterated his plan for continuing military operations in Ukraine, saying that Moscow will achieve its goals either through diplomacy or by military means. The conversation is said to have left Macron convinced that the worst is to come in Ukraine. Sunday's phone call between the two leaders have failed to yield any major diplomatic breakthrough in regards to the ongoing crisis. According to senior officials, this nearly 2-hour-long phone call with the Russian president has left Macron sure that Putin is not going to stop or step back anytime soon. Sunday's talks were initiated by the French side. This is the 4th time that the two leaders have spoken with each other since the start of the Russian invasion. Delegates from Ukraine and Russia are all set to hold another round of talks in just a few hours from now. The 3rd round of discussions will be held at the Polish-Belarusian border. Ukrainian negotiator David Arkamia has confirmed that the negotiations are set to continue. Ukraine has maintained that though Kyiv is ready for talks with Moscow, it will not accept any Russian ultimatums. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that he was open to talks with Lavrov, but that only if they were meaningful. After the 2nd talks, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed that no documents had been agreed upon. Russia has maintained that the outcome of the talks will depend on Ukrainian attitude. Russian member of the State Duma and delegation member Leonid Slutsky said that the parliamentary efforts will be needed and that some agreements will have to be cemented and taken through a national ratification procedure, adding that the resolution may not be very fast. Slutsky also noted that the implementation of agreements that will be achieved during the next round of talks must not be delayed. The comment comes as Russia has decided to open humanitarian corridors again on Monday, after the evacuation process failed over the weekend after both sides reported various ceasefire violations. Remember, Moscow and Kyiv had agreed to implement a green corridor to facilitate safe evacuation of civilians as the refugee crisis worsens in Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's recent comments have also cast shadow on the upcoming talks. Lavrov said that Zelensky's attempt to secure direct NATO help in the conflict was not helping those, adding that Moscow was not optimistic about talks due to Zelensky's angry stance.
Не добавляет оптимизма постоянные, я бы сказал, такие озлобленные заявления господина Зеленского. Вот тут он разразился инвективами в адрес заседания НАТО. В общем-то, так сказать, немножко грубил он своим кураторам, обвинял их в бездействии. И у меня возникает вопрос, если он так расстроился, что НАТО не вступилось за него, как он надеялся, значит, он все-таки полагается на урегулирование конфликта путем вовлечения НАТО во всю эту историю, а не путем переговоров. Значит, получается, что он не слышит постоянных утверждений, которые звучат из Вашингтона, из Парижа, из Берлина, из других столиц, о том, что НАТО не собирается вмешиваться в этот конфликт. И получается, что он все-таки стремится спровоцировать конфликт с участием НАТО, между НАТО и Россией.
The global community has come together to show support for people of Ukraine. In an attempt to highlight the atrocities and human cost of war, an Argentine artist is calling for peace with a mural of an injured Ukrainian woman. It's an image that has come to become a symbol of the war. We leave you with the visuals. Thanks for watching.